So maybe finding a tennis ball for today's class. Today's class, we're going to focus on our fascia, or the connective tissue. So you might find a tennis ball and start to make your way down toward your back on the mat. No rush, no hurry to get there. And when you arrive, you might take a moment to either just rest and settle here, or if your body is craving motion, maybe giving the knees a little rock. If the low back is tired, maybe tucking the knees close and drawing some gentle circles. And taking your time here as you settle into this space. Noticing your breath. And again, noticing if for you, if it feels better to move, please continue to do so, or just to rest. And you might see if the next breath can come in toward the belly. And then you might take a moment, whether you're moving or resting, just to notice if there are places that feel comfortable, that feel at ease. And as you notice those places that feel at ease, maybe you also notice places that feel tense, tight, or tired. And just making a little mental note of where they are. Maybe imagining that you can breathe into those places that feel a little tight, or like they could use a little more support. And then when you're ready, starting to bend one knee and the other. And taking a little rock side to side. And when you find an inhale, float the fingertips up toward the ceiling. You might take a moment to flex and press the palms up, and then to show the back of the hand. And taking your time to show the palm and show the back of the hand. And you might notice here where and when you feel tension. So when we stretch, they say about 40 to 45% of the stretch comes from our muscle. And about 40 to 45% of the stretch or more comes from our connective tissue, from the fascia. And the last little bit, sometimes they attribute that to the nervous system. It depends on which study you look at. But when you feel like you hit the end range of motion here with your hands, if you took the other hand, could you help the hand go a little further? Isn't that interesting that the hand might not be able to go as far by itself as it can with a little help? Again, being kind when you do that. Part of that is our connective tissue, our fascia, can be so strong, holding you in place, just like if you've ever wrapped a lot of plastic wrap around food and you're trying to get into it. That plastic wrap can really hold things in well. The same deal with our fascia. And it runs through the whole body. If you took out everything else from your body, all your muscle cells, all your bones, all the fluids, you would still look like you. You'd just look like a spider-webby version, because that fascia goes through all the muscles. It surrounds each muscle cell. It's like a 3D web. So when your wrists have had enough attention, go ahead and send the hands toward the opposite elbow. And we'll take the elbows to one side. And as you inhale, bring them up. Exhale, take the elbows to side two. And focusing on just the shoulders here for a moment. So our shoulders are a place where there are layers of muscle that rest on top of each other. And when our fascia, our connective tissue, is healthy, they slide and glide over each other. But if things tend to get stuck, or if there's some strain, that fascia can become adhered or stuck in places to those other muscles. And that can really limit our range of motion. So your choice here, this flow of inhaling up and exhaling down targets more of the muscle. So if there's some soreness, that might be a good thing to keep doing. Or you might start to settle the elbows to one side and just rest here, breathing into that shape. Maybe thinking of anchoring both shoulders toward the mat while you let the elbow that's near the floor sink down. And when we hold these shapes for 30 seconds, that's when we start to affect the fascia. And in yin yoga, we often hold them 90 seconds or more. Inhale, coming up to center. Exhale, coming to side two. And if you paused on side one, pause here on side two. Inviting the shoulder to anchor toward the mat. Letting the elbow sink down as well. And just breathing here as you pause for a few seconds. Maybe noticing how the shape feels different. And it is normal if we have more tension on one side than the other. We usually use our hands and arms in different ways. Inhale back up to center. And then when you exhale, your choice, you might find that rock again, adding the knees. Inhale to center. Exhale, gentle twist. And taking your time with this. No rush, no hurry with it. And when your twist feels nice and even down on both sides, take the hands up overhead. See if it's comfortable to reach the legs out long. Maybe taking a little wiggle side to side. And then we'll invite the heels over to one side. And the hands might come with it, or we might find our elbows again. Finding banana asana. And breathing into the shape. So this helps open the sidelines of the body. And they say it's really helpful for the gallbladder meridian. And noticing if you can sink both hips and both shoulders toward the mat while you're here. And then when you're ready, we'll come back towards center. Maybe take a little reach and a little wiggle down through the feet, up through the hands. And when you exhale, let's move towards side two. Heels to the left, hands to the left, or maybe elbow. And breathing when you're here. And just noticing if it's different on this side to anchor the shoulders and hips toward the mat. No rush, no hurry. When you're ready, inhaling back towards center. And see if things need a little wiggle again. And then bending the knees, bringing feet toward the mat. Taking a little rock side to side if it feels good for the knees. And then let's bring that right knee in close toward the ribs. Now left leg can reach out long against the mat if it feels good, or keep the knee bent if that feels better. And drawing a little circle here with the knee up on the ceiling. And then sending the hands behind the thigh, inhaling to press that right heel up high. And just notice where you feel tension here. Exhale, bend the knee. Inhale, pressing up. Maybe giving the ankle a little length here too. Exhale, bend the knee. One more inhale, pressing up. And then when you exhale, we'll bend the knee, drawing it close one more time. And then preparing for one more twist, yogi's choice. You can bend the other knee if you've had anything going on with the SI joints or the low back. Or you can take that right knee right across over to the left. Again, if that doesn't feel good, tuck that left knee in underneath for support. Maybe the right arm reaches out to the side. Maybe we turn the head to the right and breathe here. And the left leg, if it's long, it can stay long, pressing. Or you can also try sliding that heel toward the hip and maybe connecting the hand to the foot, if that feels good. And when you're ready, release the foot if you were connected. We'll take right knee back toward the ribs, maybe taking a little rock side to side. And then tuck the left knee in to join it. And see if it feels good to rock here. Or maybe to press both heels up high. Maybe noticing the difference between where one leg feels tension and the other. And then let's keep that left knee in close. Right foot can rest on the mat or leg can reach out long. Drawing some gentle circles with that left knee. That helps move the synovial fluid around through the hip joint. Maybe sending hands behind the thigh. Inhaling to press the foot up. Exhaling to bend. Inhale to press and lift. Maybe giving the ankle a little motion. Exhaling down. And one more, inhaling up. Exhaling to bend. And taking one more little squeeze in. And then your choice as we set up for the twist. That twist might be tucking the right knee in close to and taking both knees over together. Might be sliding the hips a little to the left. And then taking that left knee across to the right. Maybe the left arm reaches out. Maybe we breathe while we're here. Maybe we bend the right knee and take the heel toward the hip. Maybe we connect the hand to the foot. Noticing your breath. And then when you're ready, no rush, no hurry. Starting to release. And tucking knee back in, making your way to the back. Maybe the right knee comes into join, taking a little rock if it feels good. And then pressing the heels up high. Maybe giving the ankles a little flex. And again, just noticing here. If there's a difference, maybe on one leg you notice the calf feels more tense. On the other leg it's the hamstring behind the thigh. Maybe both legs it's the hamstring. Just notice where you feel the most sensation of stretch or tension. And then we'll tuck the knees close, taking one more breath to rock. Preparing to make our way up towards seated. Your choice. We might hold behind the legs and rock and roll our way up. Or we might rock to the side and reach through hand and foot to find our seat. When you find your seat, take a moment here, maybe a little shift side to side. And maybe notice again where things feel comfortable and at ease, and if and where you notice tension. And for some people, when they're seated, the low back feels a lot of tension. You might be doing a lot of work to hold you here. And then we'll take a moment and explore what happens when we add a little bit of motion. We're going to start small with this. Be really gentle if you've had anything going on in your low back. But we'll try drawing just a little circle. And the hips can move with you, but we want to keep the majority of this motion happening in the spine. But it's okay to let the hips roll a little with you. Drawing a few little circles and seeing if it feels like it might be comfortable to make those circles bigger. Noticing if you exhale when you circle back, and then inhale when you circle forward, if that helps match the motions your body is making. And when you find a center with the next circle, maybe reverse direction. And you might start those circles off small again, back and center. Just finding a little gentle circle. And then it might start to draw a little bigger if that's comfy. If it's not, that's okay. Notice your breath while you move here. So these spine circles, take the spine through a little bit of flexion when we round back, a little extension when we come forward, a little lateral bending to the side. Maybe drawing those circles even bigger if it's comfy. Again, being kind to that low back. And then when you circle your way back to center, take a pause there. Draw the spine tall and notice what's different. Those places where there was tension before, do they still feel tense? Just noticing. And then when you're ready, no rush or hurry, we'll start to find our tennis ball. We're going to start in on the back of the legs. Now, we'll do a little experiment here. Finding our Dandasana, or our staff pose. Notice if you feel any pull or tension here. Or if you start to hinge from the hips, folding forward, notice where you feel tension, if you feel that on the back of the legs. And then when you're ready, find your tennis ball and we'll tuck it in under one thigh and about the center of the thigh. You can just let the leg rest there for a moment. And then we'll see about drawing some little circles with the tennis ball. So the one way you can do this is to keep your hip on the mat, but to lift your foot and start to circle the leg around on the tennis ball. This is a form of self-myofascial release. You can add more by pressing into the hands and lifting the hips to circle a little more. If this feels like it's too much pressure, you can rock to the side and use your hand or press the hips on the mat and just use the hands to draw some circles on the tennis ball here. That's okay too. But our goal is to take the back of this thigh and draw some circles all the way from just behind the knee up the length of the leg toward the hip. So the hamstrings muscles are getting some work here. There are 3 long muscles that run down the back of the leg. And they work together to help draw the heel toward the hip. They also can help in hip extension. And then noticing if you find a spot that feels a little electrical, maybe drawing a circle around it. Breathing when you're here. The hamstrings are a place that there can be a lot of tension stored, especially from our modern lifestyle. The shapes we take don't always give the hamstring its full range of motion. And then when that leg feels pretty good, you might take a moment and find that Dandasana shape again. And just notice the difference from one side to the other. Or maybe you're taking that little hinge at the hip and noticing the difference. And then we'll even you back out. Go ahead and bring the tennis ball over to side 2. And we're finding some little circles. Again, your choice. The hips might be on the mat. You might be lifting the hips. As long as you're being kind to the body, there's really no wrong way to do this for the hamstrings. We don't want to push really hard and hold in one place. But drawing these little circles can be helpful. Remember, you can use the hand to help do this, or maybe the body weight, depending on how things feel there for you today. I'm trying to draw some of those little circles. And it may not be quite as comfy as a real regular massage, but this self-myofascial release can still do a lot of great work to increase blood flow, to help heal scar tissue, to help reduce those adhesions or places where those bits of fascia get stuck, and can limit range of motion. No rush, again, no hurry. But when it feels like that second leg has had a good amount of attention, let's take a pause here to check in again. Noticing if Dandasana feels any different. And it may or it may not. If you notice a huge difference, like now in Dandasana you sit up tall with no stress, no troubles, it's a good sign that you have some tension in the hamstrings that can be a challenge for you when you're there. You might take a little hinge from the hip. Just see how things feel in the start of seated forward bend. And then we're going to give our back a little more attention next. So yogi's choice. You might stay seated and just find a comfy spot to start rolling the tennis ball on the lower back. Drawing some little circles here. To add a little bit more, you can use a wall behind you to press the tennis ball to the wall, and then to add a little motion. Or if it feels comfy, you can also take the tennis ball to your back down on the mat. So we want to be, again, kind to the body. We don't want to try to just press that ball in. So if you can't breathe when you're doing this, that's a sign that you might be going a little too far. We want to work this area, whether we're down on the mat or working with our hand. We want to work this area between the top of the hips. You can probably feel the top of those hip bones. And the lower ribs, trying not to put any extra pressure on those lower ribs because they don't hook in all the way around on the front. So working in this area here, in between those spots. And again, drawing little circles. Try not to push directly on the spine. You might come toward the spine, but try not to push directly on it. And how's your breath when you're here? Can you think of breathing toward the low back? And again, if you find those electrical spots, go ahead and draw a little circle around them. And then when you're ready, maybe you're switching sides on the low back. Still working the low back, but moving towards side 2 if you haven't already. Noticing again, if you can breathe while you do this, that's a good sign. And if you're holding your breath, that might indicate that we're pressing a little more than needed. More is not always better. Again, be kind to your body. Thinking of supporting it here instead of fixing something that's stuck. Just think of offering some support, a little extra care, maybe a little compassion and gratitude in the process for your body. And then when you're ready, when your back feels like it's had enough attention, we'll make our way back to check in with Dandasana. So if you're down on the mat, you might rock and reach to come up. Sending the legs long, finding that staff pose and noticing, how does staff pose feel now? And then maybe taking that little hinge from the hip to see, is there a difference? No rush, no hurry. When you're ready from this Dandasana, go ahead and take the fingertips up tall. Exhale, hinge from the hips, folding for seated forward bend. And where do you notice length? What parts of the body feel like they're growing longer? And do you feel like there are places that feel tense, like they're resisting that lengthening? Noticing that. And then gently releasing to come back towards seated. Now we have these hamstrings and this low back that hopefully have a little more freedom and flexibility. There's one more place we're going to give attention to before we find some of our classic yoga shapes to, or more classic yoga shapes to check this out. And that's the glutes, the back of the hip. So again, to be gentle, we might stay seated and just draw some little circles around the hip. If it feels comfy, you can also, again, rest the hip on the tennis ball and then draw circles from seated. Now, this is a place that we're bound to have some of those places that feel a little electrical. So we want to make sure we can breathe, that we're not pushing too hard. Again, the back of the hip, another place similar to the shoulder where there are layers of muscle. The gluteus maximus is the big muscle on the outside, but then in underneath that, there's the gluteus medius and minimus, and then there are other hip rotators under here too. The obturators and gemellus. And, you know, we tend to sit a lot in our culture, and we tend to sit a lot in chairs. And that practice doesn't help these muscles in the back of the hip necessarily to stay as functional as they might be otherwise. When you're finished working with one side, we can switch over to side 2, maybe noticing if you're seated, the difference in how things feel. And it is normal to have one side that feels mostly comfortable, and then the other side feels really electrical or zingy. Often our legs are not quite symmetrical, so our hips work differently from one side to the other. Again, noticing if you can breathe while you're here, while you're bringing attention to the hip. Being kind in this practice. And then no rush, no hurry. If this hip needs more work, more time, take it. Again, if it's too uncomfortable, shift the weight off of the hip and you can draw circles there with your tennis ball. Or when you're ready, one more time, bring it back to Dandasana. Noticing how things feel. Maybe taking a little hinge at the hip toward that forward bend and noticing how things feel. And if you'd like, we'll take one more inhale up. Exhale, hinge and fold. Finding seated forward bend and remembering that we can bend the knees, especially if the place that feels like it doesn't want to lengthen is the back of the legs. Bending the knees takes the hamstrings out so that we can find a little more softness in the stretch. Can you breathe when you're here? And then when you're ready, we'll inhale back up towards center. And take a moment to find a seated shape. A comfy seated shape, maybe the one you took when you first came up. Noticing how things feel. If there's any more ease when you're here. Especially if there was tension in the low back when you first were seated. And then since we have this extra blood flow and maybe a little extra space freed up in that fascia, that connective tissue, now let's start to move toward all fours. Always okay to use a blanket under the knees or to double the mat up and underneath. And we'll find a little cat-cow flow using an exhale to round, an inhale to arch. And just noticing if cat-cow feels any different. Especially when you move toward cow. And when you find the next cow, curl the toes in underneath. Exhale, shift and lift, downward facing dog. Pedal in, bending the knees, one and the other. How does down dog feel? Now, one thing that might be illuminated here, where we have drawn length to the low back, the back of the hips and the thighs, is if there's tension in the calves. So notice here if your calves feel tight. And then yogi's choice, we can bring it down to take a rest in child pose. We can find our 3 vinyasa flows if you're craving motion. That's our down dog to plank, knees, chest, chin, cobra or up dog. Or you're loving the tennis ball work and you notice that the back of the calves were a little bit tight when you were in down dog. You might take this yogi's choice to give the calves some attention. Again, either resting the calf on the tennis ball or using the hand there. And there's no bad choice. And sometimes when we have yogi's choice, it can feel a little like, oh, I want to do the best thing or the right thing. I want to make the right choice. But they can all be the right choice. You know, it's just up to you in this moment to find what feels best for your body, for your practice. And if you are working with the calves, you might take time to visit side 2. And if you're flowing, you might start working your way through that last flow. Noticing your breath, whether you're softening in child pose or working with a tennis ball. And then when you're ready, no rush, no hurry, we'll all meet back on all fours. Taking one cat-cow and exhale around. Inhale to arch, toes curling underneath. Exhale, shift and lift, downward facing dog. Notice how this down dog feels. And when you exhale, step, walk, or hop, feet to the top of the mat. And soften and forward bend. Noticing how your forward bend feels. Gentle nod yes or slow shake no. Exhale, bend the knees, hips back behind. Inhale your way toward chair pose, Utkatasana. Maybe exploring if it feels good to settle low or to reach up high. And then use an inhale to come all the way up. Exhale, hands down by the sides. Finding Tadasana or mountain pose. When you find it, see if it needs a shake, a shrug, or a shift. This is the first time you've been standing in this class. So take a moment to really set it up well. Noticing your breath. Noticing where the weight goes on the feet. Is it settled in the heels? Does it sink into the toes? Does it feel like it evenly moves through all 4 points? And then yogi's choice, if you don't have a tennis ball, what you might do next is start to shift the weight from toe to heel, just rocking, and then going side to side. You can also practice a little bit of balance if you want, by finding one foot to give attention to with the hands. Or if you have your tennis ball handy, bring your tennis ball over and see about drawing some circles on the bottom of one foot. And some places you might give extra attention to are that area in front of the heel. Maybe drawing a little horizontal line or a few little circles there. And then that area in under the big toe, especially where the big toe meets your foot. And then in under the pinky toe. And then anywhere else that feels like it might need a little extra length. Maybe rolling from under the toe toward the heel. Again, being kind to the body through the process. And then when you're ready, bringing this foot back to the mat. Maybe noticing the difference between the feet. One foot feels bigger or flatter. And when you're ready, we'll even this out with side 2 again. Maybe rolling with a tennis ball. And if you have recently injured your foot, try not to roll right over the injured area. You might draw some circles nearby, but try not to press on any areas that are directly injured. And again, giving some attention to that area in front of the heel. It's one of those spots that can help that plantar fascia, that dense, thick band of tissue that you might have heard of plantar fasciitis. But when that gets really irritated and inflamed, it's really uncomfortable. Maybe circling around the heel or toward that big toe area. And bringing some attention into where the toe meets the foot. And then in under the ball of the foot. And bringing attention to where the pinky toe meets the foot. And then finding movements that feel good. Maybe rolling from the toe toward the heel. Or maybe it feels good to scribble, like drawing just little random lines and circles on the bottom of the foot. Take your time, no rush, don't hurry with it. And then when it feels ready, go ahead and bring the foot back to the mat. Noticing how your feet feel now. And noticing how it feels to stand in mountain pose. And you've just freed up tension from the bottoms of the feet, maybe the calves, and then up through this back of the body area. So just notice if it feels like you stand with ease, or if it feels like you have to engage more muscles to stand. And then when you're ready, we'll step the feet toward each other if it's comfy, big toes touch. Use an inhale to sweep it up tall. And exhale to take it up and over for a crescent moon. Inhale with length. Exhale up and over. Inhale tall. Exhale up and over. Inhale tall. Exhale up and over. And taking one last crescent moon. Then sending hands to the heart. Pausing here to breathe. And just for the fun of it, see what happens if you shift your weight toward the right foot. Does the left knee float? And if you're curious here with that left knee floating, maybe you just try taking the shoulders open to the left. Maybe you anchor hand to knee and reach the left fingertips back behind you. Finding revolved hand to big toe pose. And if it feels good, you can actually take the hand to the big toe and find length while you're here. And when you're ready, bend the knee, releasing the twist. Send those left toes to the back of the mat for one high lunge. And a deep breath here. Exhale, hinge and fold, frame the foot. And then we'll move to the top of the mat, stepping the foot to forward bend. Relax the neck. Exhale, bend the knees, hips back behind. Inhale your way up towards chair, Utkatasana. And again, decide if it feels good to stay high or to go low. Inhale all the way tall. Exhale, Tadasana. Take a moment to see if anything needs a shake before we try that little balance on side two. Now weight goes to the left and we float the right knee. And we might just stay put here floating. We might anchor outside the knee. We might take the thumb back behind us. Can you breathe when you're here? And maybe just noticing what areas feel tense and what feels nice and open today. And then we might find that big toe, if you'd like, to really take the hand toward the foot. Breathing when you're here. And when you're ready to release, gently bend. Take the torso forward, invite the toes to the back of the mat to find your high lunge. Deep breath here. Exhale, fold, frame the foot. And then slide or step back, high plank. Exhale, shift and lift, downward facing dog. Noticing how down dog feels after the feet have had some attention. As you exhale, your choice. Bring it down to rest. Take 3 vinyasa flows. Or if there's another area of the body that is craving a little attention, you might grab your tennis ball and bring some attention where it's needed. This is yogi's choice, so it's up to you. Maybe we flow. Maybe we rest. Or maybe there's somewhere else you can tell that would like a little bit of attention for that fascia, that connective tissue. There are all kinds of fun theories on fascia that are popping up now too. You know, they used to think it was just stuff that held you together. And in medical school, you know, they'd often just threw it away. Now we know that it's responsive, that it has memory. If there's been an injury, the fascia seems to store that memory. It's holding space for the blood vessels and for the nerves. So fascia that's not healthy, that's really tight and tense, can restrict blood flow and affect the nerves. And there are even some theories that consciousness, which we've always kind of equated with the brain, but that our body consciousness, it's more than just our nerves, that part of our mind and our awareness might actually take place in our fascia. Some very interesting things to consider. And taking your time, if you're finishing your last flow, or if you're working with that tennis ball in another area, taking your time to start wrapping that up. And then when you're ready, we'll make our way back towards seated, finding a comfy seated place on the mat. Taking one more opportunity just to notice how this seated shape feels. And to invite your breath to move toward the belly. And then when you're ready, we'll start to make our way down toward our back on the mat. And you can bring the tennis ball. If there's somewhere else you want to give attention to, please feel free to bring it with you. Otherwise, we'll start to make our way down. Maybe we're holding behind one leg to gently rock down. Or maybe we use both to come down long and low. Nice and slow, finding your way to your back on the mat. Maybe noticing if things feel comfy here, or if they feel like they could use a little bit of motion. If you'd like to go right into Shavasana, please do. Or you might take a little time for constructive rest today. That's bending the knees, feet to the mat. And the arms, the classic arms reach across the ribs. But it's always okay to rest them where they're comfy, either hands by hips or cactus arms. And breathing when you're here, settling in. Always okay to find a different shape. If you have a wall handy, you might take legs up the wall as well. And taking this time at the end of practice to focus a little more on the nervous system. By breathing toward the belly and taking a nice slow exhale. And that helps the nervous system to be calm. And you might start to think of letting your body sink down into the mat with your exhales. And if you love the restorative shape you're in, feel free to stay put here. You're welcome to stay there for Shavasana. Or if you'd like to have time for a classic final relaxation in this class, you might start to make your way toward that shape over the next minute or so. And then taking these last few minutes of practice to integrate all the work from today's class. Maybe using the exhales to help you sink and soften. And giving yourself permission to just be without having to do anything. And if you are able to take a long Shavasana today, feel free to stay put where you are. Or when you're ready, you might start to wiggle the fingers and toes. Finding what's ready to stretch and reach out. Or to bend and draw in close. And taking your time, no rush, no hurry. Maybe starting to rock to one side or the other. Maybe inhaling your way up towards seated. Finding any comfy seated place. And again, maybe just noticing where you feel ease. And when you find an inhale, draw the fingertips up tall. Exhale, hands toward the heart. Thank you all for taking and making the time to practice today. And namaste.